Airlines 737 MAX flight. A report has unraveled many details of how things may have gone wrong right from the start.
Our cover story tonight is about a plane crash. The Ethiopian Airlines. Everyone on board died.
Widely known as a multinational Chinese airline company, Boeing has made its way to the top by offering outstanding services alongside innovative technologies. However, as is common with companies in the same league as Boeing, the Chinese company has constantly found itself at the receiving end of backlash from the public. But this time, it seems like the repercussions of Boeing's actions might lead to a case that is too big to resolve easily.
They don't hold anything back, and I'm not aware of anything that has been cited with respect to those accidents that we haven't taken action on.
How did things get so complicated for the company? Join us as we uncover how the Boeing CEO was sentenced to life imprisonment. Boeing's Ethiopian Airlines scandal. Boeing has admitted full responsibility for the second crash of its 737 MAX model in Ethiopia, in a legal agreement with families of the 157 victims. Lawyers for the families said it was a significant milestone for families to achieve justice. The legal stipulation, filed in Chicago, stated that the aircraft manufacturer accepted responsibility for the crash of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 in March 2019, having produced an airplane that had an unsafe condition, and would not seek to blame any other party, specifically including the pilots. This paves the way for families of all crash victims, from 35 countries, to seek compensation in the U.S. under Illinois law, in return for not seeking punitive damages against Boeing, limiting the potential financial liability for the manufacturer. The Ethiopian Airlines 737 MAX crashed soon after takeoff from Addis Ababa for Nairobi. It was the second 737 MAX disaster in 6 months, after a Lion airplane in Indonesia crashed in October 2018, killing 189 people. Investigators identified faults in the sensors and new flight control software that had not been explained to pilots. The model was grounded worldwide, but soon returned to service with airlines, including Ryanair, taking deliveries of the aircraft. The lead lawyers for the families, Robert Clifford, Stephen Marks, and Justin Green, pointed out that it was a significant milestone for the families in their pursuit of justice against Boeing. However, the situation seems to have gotten out of hand and changed dramatically. Stay tuned, because here's where things start to get interesting. The investigation ensured the families of the victims were all treated equitably and eligible to recover full damages under Illinois law, while creating a pathway for them to proceed to a final resolution, whether through settlements or trial. Boeing, however, didn't hesitate to agree to a $2.5 billion settlement with the U.S. Department of Justice in fines and compensation, which included a $500 million fund to compensate families of the 346 victims of both 737 MAX crashes. James Healy Pratt of Keystone Law, who has acted in similar cases, said the agreement was welcome news, adding that in all probability, the claims would be privately mediated to resolution. A Boeing spokesperson addressed the public with a statement that showed Boeing was committed to ensuring that all families who lost loved ones in the accidents were fully and fairly compensated for their loss. The agreement filed with the court stood as an important step forward in that process, but it didn't take long for things to change. Boeing's agreement with the families was a chance to allow the parties to focus their efforts on determining the appropriate compensation for each family. However, in recent news, the Department of Justice has reportedly decided to drop its criminal case against Boeing, which would be the company's one-way ticket out of any jail sentence. Critics believe the decision to drop the case against Boeing is another sign that the Trump administration has been going easier on prosecuting corporate misdeeds than the Biden administration. The decision sparked harsh criticism from some of the families of victims of the two fatal crashes who had hoped for a different outcome. Many of the families had not been happy with the original plea agreement, seeking to have criminal prosecution of individual executives at Boeing and much steeper financial penalties than the $487 million in fines that Boeing had agreed to pay, an amount that is included in the NPA. Now, they appear to be more agitated than ever due to the Justice Department's decision to let the CEO of Boeing and his company off the hook. Chris Moore, who lost his daughter Danielle in the 2019 Ethiopian Airlines crash, didn't hesitate to speak up on what he believed was an injustice done to them. According to him, the Department of Justice was trying to sweep the errors and mistakes of Boeing and the FAA under the rug. Although it is said that justice is supposed to be blind for it to be fair, Chris believes the prosecutors are blind to the facts of the case. Boeing has already admitted their criminality by pleading guilty earlier, which should make it easy for them to prosecute the Chinese aircraft maker in a court of law. The Justice Department did not respond to CNN's request for comment, but said in its filing that the decision dropped the criminal case against Boeing. Instead, they felt the need to reach a non-prosecution agreement was the right decision given what could be proved in the case. The Justice Department said in the filing that the agreement guarantees further accountability and substantial benefits from Boeing immediately, while avoiding the uncertainty and litigation risk presented by proceeding to trial. The NPA includes Boeing agreeing to pay an additional $444.5 million in victim compensation, on top of the $500 million it had already paid. But it freed Boeing from having to plead guilty to defrauding the Federal Aviation Administration during the process of seeking certification for the 737 MAX to begin carrying passengers. A design flaw in the 737 MAX that was not revealed during that process has been tied to the two crashes. It also frees Boeing from being under the oversight of a federally appointed monitor who would have ensured the company was making promised improvements in the quality and safety of its aircraft. That federal monitor would have been part of the guilty plea Boeing agreed to in July. Instead, Boeing itself will hire an outside contractor to oversee its operations, rather than having one chosen for it. Boeing expressed its willingness to accept the department's ruling and informed the public that it is now committed to improving its safety record and company culture. Keep watching as we dig deeper into Boeing and its scandals through the years. Boeing's 2024 scandal. With two crashes of its new 737 MAX models in 2019, Boeing's last 6 years have been plagued by scandal and scrutiny. Boeing has been charged with deceiving the Federal Aviation Administration during the certification of its newest and most demanded aircraft, the 737 MAX. Just as investors believed Boeing started a new chapter after the 737 MAX had been certified, another round of scandals began when a passenger door aboard a Boeing aircraft in an Alaska Airlines flight blew away mid-air and a whistleblower took his own life. The last thing the company needed was a unionized strike, which would further delay deliveries long overdue to airlines worldwide. After more than 5 years of intense scrutiny, it is uncertain whether Boeing has weathered the storm. Boeing's 2024 started with yet another incident in which a mistake led to another scandal. Shortly after takeoff, the door of an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX blew off. The National Transportation Safety Board did an open investigation of the incident, where investigators found Boeing had not documented critical assembly line steps, including the reinstallation of bolts essential for holding the plug in place. Boeing, on the other hand, admitted there were no records. The records in question are documentation of steps on the assembly line last fall when National Transportation Safety Board investigators believe Boeing employees removed critical bolts that hold the plug in place but did not reinstall the bolts before the plane left the Boeing factory in October 2023, but it doesn't just end here. The plane flew about 150 commercial flights before the door plug flew off the plane mid-flight on January 5th. This revelation comes on the heels of the Federal Aviation Administration's findings from a 6-week audit that pointed out non-compliance issues in Boeing's manufacturing process control, parts handling and storage, and product control. Although the plane landed safely at Portland International Airport, the incident once again put Boeing's controversial airplane in the spotlight. The 4 missing bolts were never installed at the Boeing factory, and no documentation was found showing which Boeing employee worked on the airplane's door. This incident led the Department of Justice to reevaluate their original settlement with Boeing. Like John Barnett, whistleblowers inside Boeing began to speak up after the third 737 MAX accident. Barnett sued Boeing, claiming the company illegally retaliated against him after voicing his concerns with the production's safety standards to the public, since management would not listen. While FAA regulators and Boeing executives kept as much information behind closed doors as possible, some employees, frustrated by their employer, started to push the idea of transparency that Boeing was supposed to be following after the initial accidents. Unfortunately, however, Barnett was found on March 17th after successfully taking his own life. Although Barnett can no longer testify against the company, concerns about Boeing's safety procedures have remained silent. The second whistleblower, Joshua Dean, also lost his life on May 2nd after a sudden bacterial infection. There is no proven connection between Barnett and Dean's accidents to Boeing, but it is difficult to ignore these very convenient coincidences. To add to the constant state of scandal in the company, Boeing has an ongoing unionized labor dispute that has continued to create instability for the company. Over 33,000 machinists at the Boeing factories in the Pacific Northwest began their strike on September 13th, as 94.6% of the union rejected the contract that would have raised their pay by 25% in the next 4 years. Because workers have not seen a salary increase in over 16 years, they believe a 40% increase is justified. Boeing's latest offer included a 35% pay increase, a $7,000 signing bonus, and some enhanced contributions to employee pension plans. However, 64% of union members voted to remain on strike, resulting in the offer's rejection. Considering the company has lost $25 billion since the first 737 MAX crash, the last thing it needed was a widespread labor dispute, which poses further delays in the delivery for their airline customers. The company reported a $6 billion loss in its latest quarter on the day the union rejected the second contract. With so many employers across the supply chain depending on one of America's largest exporters, Boeing plays an integral role in the U.S. economy. Boeing's last 6 years have been dominated by uncertainty, and with a continuing labor dispute, long-delayed deliveries, and a falling stock price, Boeing's years of instability will likely continue. In another Senate committee shortly after the Alaska Airlines incident, Senator Josh Hawley told Boeing's CEO that he was cutting corners and therefore eliminating safety procedures. By alienating nearly every stakeholder critical for Boeing's success, it is difficult to think that the problems the company continues to face will disappear. The company urgently needs to change its management culture and start rebuilding its credibility as the American staple it once was. By prioritizing its workforce and safety, it might not be too late for Boeing to resurrect its reputation. Amidst all this, Boeing Airlines finds itself in a storm of legal challenges, grappling with a series of incidents highlighting systemic issues in its risk management practices. Boeing's challenges underscore the importance of robust risk management and governance practices. As the company works to address these issues, the broader lessons for the industry are clear. Prioritize risk management, ensure transparency, and maintain a culture that values and rewards the identification and resolution of safety concerns. As Boeing navigates these turbulent times, the lessons learned will shape not only its future, but also the aviation industry as a whole. Stay tuned, because this next part is sure to keep you glued to your screens. The story behind the Boeing 737 MAX disaster. The Boeing 737 MAX, once heralded as a triumph in aviation technology and efficiency, has since become synonymous with one of the most catastrophic failures in modern corporate history. It was a project that was initially designed to sustain Boeing's dominance in the narrow-body aircraft market, but instead resulted in 2 fatal crashes, the loss of 346 lives, and an unprecedented global grounding of an entire fleet. Boeing's 737 series has long been a cornerstone of the company's commercial aircraft offerings. Since its inception in the late 1960s, the 737 has undergone numerous iterations, each improving upon its predecessor while maintaining the model's reputation for reliability and efficiency. By the 2000s, the 737 had become the best-selling commercial aircraft in history, with airlines around the world relying on its performance for short and medium-haul flights. However, by the early 2010s, Boeing faced significant competition from Airbus, particularly with the introduction of the Airbus A320 new engine option. The A320neo offered superior fuel efficiency and lower operating costs, thanks to its state-of-the-art engines and aerodynamic enhancements. In response, Boeing made the strategic decision to develop the 737 MAX, an upgrade of the existing 737 platform that would incorporate similar fuel-efficient engines and other improvements to match the A320neo without necessitating extensive retraining of pilots, but that wasn't all. Boeing's leadership was acutely aware that any requirement for significant additional training would increase costs for airlines and potentially drive them to choose Airbus instead. The company selected the CFM International LEAP 1B engines for the 737 MAX, which were larger and more fuel-efficient than those on previous 737 models. However, this choice introduced significant engineering challenges, particularly related to the aircraft's aerodynamics and balance. However, the maneuvering characteristics augmentation system was developed as a solution to these challenges. The system was designed to automatically adjust the aircraft's angle of attack in certain conditions to prevent stalling, thereby making the 737 MAX handle similarly to older 737 models. This was intended to reassure airlines that their pilots could transition to the new model with minimal additional training. As Dennis Muilenburg, Boeing's CEO at the time, stated, the company's goal with the 737 MAX was to offer a seamless transition for their customers, ensuring they could benefit from improved efficiency without significant operational disruptions. The MKS would later become central to the 737 MAX's tragic failures. But before the crisis, the 737 MAX project was officially launched in 2011, with Boeing announcing that the aircraft would feature new engines, improved aerodynamics, and advanced avionics. The design and development process was marked by intense pressure to meet tight deadlines and to deliver a product that could quickly enter the market. By 2013, Boeing had completed the design phase, and the first test flights were scheduled for early 2016. The first test flight of the 737 MAX took place in January 2016, and the aircraft performed as expected under controlled conditions. The Federal Aviation Administration granted the 737 MAX its certification in March 2017, allowing it to enter commercial service. The aircraft was initially well received by airlines, with thousands of orders placed within the first year of its launch. However, it didn't take long before calamity struck and things went south. Lion Air Flight JT610, a Boeing 737 MAX, traveling in Indonesia from Jakarta to Pangkal Pinang, soon crashed, killing all 189 passengers and crew on board. Questions quickly emerge over previous control problems related to the aircraft's MCAS. This marked the first major incident involving the 737 MAX, and it raised significant concerns about the safety of the aircraft. Regardless of the disaster, Boeing's share price reached $446, a record, after the company reported $100 billion in annual revenues for the first time. This reflected investor confidence in Boeing's financial performance, despite the Lion Air crash. About 2 years later, Ethiopian Airlines Flight ET-302, another Boeing 737 MAX, crashed shortly after takeoff from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, killing all 157 people on board, but more was yet to come. The circumstances of this crash were eerily similar to the Lion Air disaster, with the MCAS system again suspected to be a contributing factor. The crash led to global scrutiny of the 737 MAX's safety. Following the incident, U.S. President Donald Trump grounded the entire 737 MAX fleet, following the lead of regulators in several other countries. This grounding was unprecedented in its scope, affecting airlines worldwide and marking a significant turning point in the crisis surrounding the 737 MAX. By October that same year, Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg was accused of supplying flying coffins to airlines during angry questioning by U.S. senators. His testimony was widely criticized, and his handling of the crisis further eroded confidence in Boeing's leadership. By December, Boeing fired Dennis Muilenburg, appointing Chairman Dave Calhoun as the new chief executive officer. This leadership change was seen as an attempt to restore confidence in Boeing and address the mounting crisis, and it did that temporarily. The following year, a U.S. congressional report blamed Boeing and regulators for the tragic and avoidable 737 MAX crashes. The report highlighted numerous failures in the design, certification, and regulatory oversight processes, and it called for significant reforms in the aviation industry. Although Boeing somehow made it out of this particular mess, it seems like the company is once again bound to encounter a hitch sooner or later. Regardless, the Chinese airline maker keeps pushing with the hopes of buying back customers' trust and regaining their place among the top airline companies in China and the world as a whole. As Boeing seeks to clear its name following the different scandals surrounding the company, will things go back to normal, or will things eventually change for the worse? Let us know what you think in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more videos. Also, click on the next video on your screen. You will love it.